For children with food allergies, Halloween can be a tricky time when it comes to treats. Our health specialist, Leah Sarich, now with what you need to know to make sure your kids stay safe this Halloween. I'm really glad you're bringing this up, you know, because it's something I actually hadn't considered.
Well, I don't think a lot of people have, and that's why we really need to talk about this. Because think about it this way, 1% of all children have a peanut allergy. And that's the one we're going to talk about mostly because it is the most common and the most severe, causing most of all the fatal and near fatal anaphylaxis reactions.
Wow.
So this is what we need to know. And really, when you think about 1% of all children, through the course of that Halloween night, inevitably you are going to hand out candy to a child with a peanut allergy.
Hey.
Yay, yeah, so worth thinking about. So I spoke with allergist Dr. Joel Doctor about this, and he says, you know, really, families with a child with a peanut allergy or any kind of food allergy on Halloween night, they need to be prepared and they need to have a plan.
The child should have a good-sized meal before they go out trick-or-treating so they're not hungry. And it'll be easier for them not to eat candy once they're out there. And that should be a deliberate plan. The child should be told not to eat any candy until they come back home. Once they do come back home, the parents should go through all the candy and take out anything that may be unsafe. And the child doesn't have to lose out too badly because they can swap the candy with their siblings or friends so they're not overall losing out.
Right, which is good information because they're going to have to trade some of that candy inevitably. But these families also need to know what to do if in fact there is an allergic reaction on Halloween night. So number one, that child must have their auto-injector on hand at all times. So that's their EpiPen or their Allerject. They also need to know when to use it. And ideally, they would know when to use it and have had a conversation with their health professional before tomorrow night. However, the basic guideline is if the child is having an allergic reaction and there's any kind of respiratory problem going on, so any kind of trouble breathing, use it without hesitation. Right. And also, if it's unclear whether the child is having respiratory problems, use it anyway. Yeah. It's safer to use it than to not use it. Sure. So keep that in mind. And remember, epinephrine is very well tolerated by children, so it's not going to hurt them even if it's given prematurely. So give it to them anyway. It's much safer to go that way. The other subgroup we need to talk about here are children with asthma, because there's a big crossover here. Children with asthma are often children with food allergies because these two conditions are genetically linked. So we have a big crossover here. And Dr. Doctor says it's really important that the children with asthma and food allergies have that asthma really well controlled, particularly for tomorrow night.
They don't want asthma interfering with their activities as they're outside, you know, running around in cold air. That can sometimes trigger asthma. So we don't want to have asthma impacting on their Halloween evening. And secondly, those kids that have poorly controlled asthma tend to have much more severe allergic reactions when they eat a food they're allergic to. So we want to make sure the asthma is really well controlled so that if there is an allergic reaction, those airways are relatively protected, reducing the risk of having severe pulmonary involvement.
Good information there.
Very good.
So, of course, we've been talking about peanut allergies, but there's a few others. Of course, milk allergy is a big one because, of course, what's in chocolate? Milk, right? So there's going to be a lot of chocolate floating around tomorrow night. The other thing to consider is sesame. So there's lots of sesame in candy that we may not be aware of. So if your child has a sesame allergy, make sure you're really aware of that as well.
Okay, so I'm thinking as somebody who has already gone out and bought my candy, I have candy that is not peanut-free.
Right.
I realize.
So, and so do I. And I did the interview after that. I went, oh, I didn't even think of this. But you know, Dr. Doctor says it's that whole idea that, you know, it's a village to raise a child. And he says, you know, as a community, we should really consider taking the responsibility of not handing out candy with peanuts in it, just to avoid any possible reactions in these children.
Well, I just realized now maybe I will keep them separate.
Absolutely.
And ask.
You can ask, absolutely. Absolutely. Especially with those older kids, you know, that are 13 or 12, 11, and they're out there by themselves. Mom isn't, you know, with them all the time. Those are the kids that I would be a little concerned about for sure.
This is very, very good advice. Health specialist Leah Sarich, more on your blog.
More on my blog as always. You bet.
Breakfasttelevision.ca.